Anytime I tell you, life puts on me, it controls everything around me. Singing tala big, it's tala big, yeah. Anytime I tell you, life puts on me, it controls everything around me. Singing tala big, it's tala big, yeah.
Welcome into another edition of Gamblers Anonymous. This week's episode, we will be talking about the NBA Finals, with the Warriors up 3-2 after another relatively easy win last night. We'll talk about why that is, how they've been winning easily with LeBron playing just out of his mind the way he has. We'll also talk. I'll also do my baseball quick hit segment. Most of the day is going to be focusing on the NBA Finals, on some of the interesting picks that are going on in there, because I'm looking at the MVP predictions, and there's a lot of surprises going on. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the likely winner of Game 6, whether or not Den's in 6. I think my original prediction, I think I said Golden State in 6. I either said Golden State in 6 or Golden State in 5. But, I mean, now obviously it can't be 5, so I'm going to say that they win it in 6. But regardless, I think that they probably, I mean, I know I picked that, I picked them in 6, and so I'll probably stick with my prediction, just to, kind of spoil that. But we'll also be looking at the odds for both teams to win the series now, because they've jumped dramatically over the last 24 hours, after what the Warriors did in Game 5. And whether or not the Cavs are actually a good value pick now that they're down 3-2, which is an interesting discussion to be had. But first, let's look at last night's game and what happened in that one. Mostly, early on it was the LeBron James show. Iguodala was playing well early on. The first half ended 51-50, and that's when I knew that the Warriors were going to win. I didn't know how easily they would win, but I knew they were going to win. And it seems odd because it was such a competitive game in the first half. It was going back and forth. And as soon as the first half ended and the Warriors were up 1, I knew they were going to win that game. And I texted one of my buddies about it, and the reason why is because LeBron James in that first half had 20 points, 12 assists, 8 rebounds. He almost had a triple-double. He was shooting over 50%, by the way, which is something he struggled to do all series, and he didn't end the game shooting over 50%, but at the end of the first half, he was shooting over 50%. He basically was taking part in almost every basket they had, and they were still down by 1. And I said, if I told you LeBron James had 20 points, 12 assists, and 8 rebounds, you would have said that's an average game. He did that in one half. He shot over 50%, and they're still losing by 1. I said, nobody can keep that up. There's no way they win this game. I mean, LeBron is running himself into a wall trying to win this series, and give him full credit, for what he's done. I mean, he had them in that game for 3 quarters, and then just like in Game 4, they kind of fell apart in that fourth quarter, at least a little bit later in that fourth quarter, and that has to do mostly with the way that the Warriors are playing, and also just the team that the Warriors are, because the Warriors can go a lot deeper than the Cavs can when they want to. Actually, the Warriors haven't been going that deep in this series, 7 to 8 deep usually, but they can go even deeper. I mean, they've got even Marty Spates, who would be playing like 20 minutes a game if he were on the Cavs, probably. He hasn't even played since his missed dunk, pretty much. He might have played 1 minute there at the end of Game 2 or something, but really he hasn't even been a part of this series. And David Lee's kind of taken his spot, playing. But the point is that they have a lot more bodies and a lot more guys that are physically used to playing more than 30 minutes a night. Whereas the Cavaliers are playing guys like Matthew Dellavedova 35 minutes a night. He's not used to that. They're playing Tristan Thompson, 40 minutes a night almost. They're playing they were playing Timofey Mozgov 30 plus minutes a night, 35 minutes a night, but now in that last game, in game 5, they really didn't play him much at all. They played him for a couple minutes here and there, but surprisingly, they really didn't play him. And he was the star of game 4 for Cleveland, at least. Had 28 in that game, a career high. But the interesting thing is that they decided not to go with him, basically to match the Warriors with a small lineup, which isn't the way to beat the Warriors in my opinion, because the Warriors are the best small ball team in the game when they want to be, if they go small. I mean, a lineup with Klay Thompson, with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala, depending on who else they want, they can have Sean Livingston, they can have Draymond Green, they can have Harrison Barnes. I mean, if you put Harrison Barnes and Draymond Green with those 3 guys I mentioned, Iguodala, Thompson, and Steph Curry, I mean, that's an incredible lineup to have. And they're small, but they're also tenacious. They're tough inside. I mean, Iguodala is just a tough veteran guy. He's defended LeBron. Give him credit, even though LeBron has scored a lot of points in this series. He's also had one of the highest usage rates of all time. He's basically has the ball on every single Cavs possession, every game. I mean, that's incredible. So, and when Andre Iguodala is covering him, he's struggling shooting the basketball. He's struggling to get in position where he likes it, basically inside of 5 feet, and getting those easy either fade away or just layups that he likes to get. He hasn't been able to do that against Iguodala, and so you got to credit Iggy for that. But they've also got Draymond Green, who's a very physical player, plays much bigger than his size would suggest, essentially. And you've also got Harrison Barnes, who is another guy somewhat similar to Draymond. He's not as good a defender, but he is a physical guy. He can be physical when he wants to. And then, Klay Thompson and Steph Curry are much more finesse. But Thompson's bigger than you think he is. I mean, he's bigger than most guards in the game today. And so, even though they're a small lineup, they are a tough lineup. And you got to give them credit for the way they played. But what I was saying was Blatt trying to match them small for small, I personally don't think is the way that you're going to beat the Warriors. I don't think that matching them and trying to go up tempo with them, or trying to just match that lineup is smart. Because let's think about what the Cavaliers can really do. Okay, so you've got LeBron James, who's the best player in the world. You put, who else do you put with him? You put Matthew Dellavedova. You put, I guess, J.R. Smith, maybe Iman Shumpert, and then Tristan Thompson out there for rebounding. That's not nearly as good as what the Cavs have. Matthew Dellavedova is not a good player, despite what he did in those first 2 games, despite the praise that I gave him, because he was playing very clutch basketball in those first 2 games. But we know he's not a great player. He came up big in big spots, but he's not a great player. And then you look at, Tristan Thompson is an incredible offensive rebounder, just a good rebounder in general. But he gets those hustle rebounds. He gets the tough rebounds. But he's not really a star player. He's really nothing on the offensive end. Unless he gets inside of 2 feet from the basket. And then you look at, J.R. Smith is maybe the most streaky player in basketball. He, similar to Jamal Crawford, he'll shoot it from anywhere when he wants to. If he gets the ball, he's basically a gun. All he does is shoot. And give him credit, because when he's on, it's tough to stop. And we saw last night for about a 10-minute stretch maybe, or he hit, maybe not even 10, maybe a 5-minute stretch, he hit like 4 big threes. And it was, you were saying, how do you stop this guy? He's just making so many big threes. But then he started to miss again. And he went into no man's land, and then he disappears in the second half. And if you're the Warriors, you're saying, fine, I don't care if he has a couple big minutes in the first half, because we were still winning. We withstood the onslaught of J.R. Smith and, of course, LeBron in the first half, and then they just took over later in the second half. That's fine if you're the Warriors. And Iman Shumpert is more of a defensive guy really than offense. He's a spot shooter in offense at best. Sometimes he's not even very good at that. He's mostly a very good defensive player. And that's basically their lineup. Like I said, Dellavedova not good. J.R. Smith, Shrieky, Iman Shumpert, defensive stopper, but not much of an offensive game, other than a little bit of spot shooting. And Tristan Thompson, who's also a defensive player and a rebounder, but not an offensive player. So that leaves you with LeBron James as basically your one offensive option on every possession. Well, when a defense knows you have one option every time down, it becomes kind of ridiculous. I mean, what the Warriors have done is they've said Iguodala is going to cover LeBron James 25 feet from the basket and in. And what Iguodala is doing is he's forcing him to go to the baseline, and then once he gets there, that's when they send the second defender inside of the paint. And they make sure that there's always a second defender, usually Draymond Green, inside the paint, who will stop LeBron's momentum so that he doesn't get those easy layups that he's so used to. They're not fully covering him one-on-one, although Iguodala's done a great job when he is isolated on him. They're sending that second defender, but they're sending him late so that LeBron's forced to make a pass under the basket to one of the spot shooters. And if the spot shooter makes it, they're saying, you know what, that's fine. We can live with a guy like Iman Shumpert or Matthew Dellavedova hitting a three now and again. What we can't live with is LeBron getting 80 and winning the game. I mean, because LeBron, if it were up to LeBron, he'd be scoring 80 in the series. I mean, he's making like 30, maybe a little bit more. But he's making like less than 40% of his shots in the series, right around 40%. So, I mean, if you were higher, if you were up at 50%, he'd be scoring 55 points a game. But that's why, I mean, the Warriors will live with what they're doing right now and give them credit. And so I believe that I gotta believe the Warriors win Game 6 is basically the end point of what I'm saying. Because what the Warriors did last night, I mean, the Cavaliers, like I said, LeBron James and the Cavaliers played the best half they could have possibly asked for yesterday, and they were still down by 1 at halftime. The Golden State Warriors are officially in rhythm. They're officially back to where they were in the regular season. In games 1 and 2, or games 1 through 3 actually, it just felt like they weren't the Warriors that we were used to watching, that I was used to watching. But that team is officially back. They're offensively, they're going up and down the court. They're playing their game, and Steph Curry is back. He's hitting incredible shots late in that game yesterday. Actually, basically all game yesterday. He was hitting some incredible fadeaway threes, the types of shots that nobody else in the world can hit with any consistency but Steph Curry. And it was against Matthew Dellavedova, which had to feel good for Curry. So I don't believe that, assuming that the Warriors continue playing their game, playing the way that the Warriors did all year long, I don't see Cleveland. Certainly, I don't see them winning the series, because even if they won Game 6, they'd have to go back to Oracle. So I can't see that. I think that they're going to give a good fight in Game 6. I don't see LeBron. I mean, the old saying is that the toughest animal is a wounded animal. And so I don't think that the Cavaliers, with their backs against the wall, essentially nothing to lose in Game 6, I think they're going to go, guns blazing. LeBron's probably going to go for 45. So the spread right now is actually Golden State favored by 4.5. I think I'd jump on Cleveland plus 4.5, because I don't see them losing by 4.5. I think if they lose, it's going to be a close game. But I still think Golden State probably wraps it up late in that game. I think that's something, maybe just fatigue. Cleveland maybe is up late, up by, say, 4 or 5 late, and maybe they just scrounge the lead. Maybe Golden State just wants it more, or Golden State just is less fatigued than Cleveland is, because that's the way the series has gone, is that Golden State has really dominated the fourth quarters in this series. And that just can't happen when you're Cleveland. But essentially, Cleveland's playing undermanned. They've only got 6 or 7 guys that they can rotate in, and that's why you see guys getting fatigued in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's not that surprising, and it's not rocket science why it's happening. So I think Golden State wraps up the series, which gets us into the next discussion of the MVP race. First we'll look at the predictions to win the series. I said Golden State wraps it up in all likelihood. The interesting thing is that the Cavaliers to win the series right now are about are 5-1. Golden State to win the series is about 1 to, let me see, it's about 1-10 actually. So I mean, you pick Golden State to win the series and you're winning very, very little. Actually, here's an official Vegas guide basically, and it's 1-11 for Golden State, and actually 7-1 for the Warriors. So even or for the Cavs, sorry, on that one. So the Cavaliers at 7-1, Warriors at 1-11. I actually kind of like the Cavs at 7-1 better than the Warriors. I wouldn't put money on the Warriors at 1-11. 2 games left, and you tell me LeBron James has to win 2 games in a row for the NBA title. That's not the most unheard of thing in the world. And Golden State, I mean, realistically, Game 6 in Cleveland should be a game that LeBron James wins. They've been tremendous at home all year long, pretty much unbeatable, much like the Warriors have. And then in the Game 7, are you going to bet against LeBron? Because that doesn't, I mean, do you really bet against the best player in the world? We saw it a few years ago. Maybe it's more than a few years ago now. It's about 4 or 5 years ago. I think 5 when the Lakers played against the Celtics. And in Game 7, Kobe actually didn't shoot well. But everybody, essentially what you said is, do you bet against the best player in the world in this game, in Game 7? And you really couldn't do it. Kobe shot poorly, but he basically grabbed every loose rebound in that game. He did everything aside from shoot well to win that game. And that's just the type of effort that you expect from the best player. And that's the type of effort I would expect from LeBron James if they can get to Game 7. Whether or not they can is what we'll see. I think Golden State, honestly, I think not their best chance, but I think I think they're going to come out with some desperation in Game 6 as well, because I think you really want to wrap this series up in 6. Not just for the obvious, you want to wrap it up early, but because you don't want to give LeBron James any chance to see the light at the end of the tunnel. As soon as he gets that third win, as soon as it's 3-3, and LeBron James knows, okay, there's one game, as Tim Tebow would like to say, there's one game for the rest of our lives. I think that LeBron James would give them a chance at the end of that game. I'd still pick Golden State to win, but LeBron James is giving them a chance in that Game 7. So it's interesting to see the odds swayed so heavily in Golden State's favor when realistically all LeBron has to do, LeBron has to find a way to win 2 games against the best team in basketball. Sounds difficult, but the first one's at home, and then, maybe Golden State tightens up in a Game 7. Maybe they tighten up in Game 6 now that they see that the championship's right in front of them. So many things can happen that I'm surprised that the odds are that heavily in Golden State's favor, even though Golden State is up 3-2. So that's a bit of a surprise. But so what does that tell us moving forward, going to the MVP race and looking at the odds for that right now? Steph Curry currently is the odds-on favorite, slightly over LeBron. Steph Curry's odds are about 3-4. So if you put 4 down, you get 3. And LeBron James' odds are about 1-1, basically. LeBron's odds are, which is very surprising to me that he has 1-1 odds. And then you've got Iguodala at about 5-1, which surprises me, I think, even more than the LeBron James one. Because obviously, if the Cavs win the series, nobody else is winning MVP. Let's not kid ourselves. Nobody else from the Cavs should even be on this list. And rightly so. Tristan Thompson and Matthew Dellavedova are the next 2 on the list. And they're at like 100-1 and 125-1 respectively. So they don't really matter. We know LeBron James is winning MVP if they win. The interesting thing that I've seen today is a lot of people are saying if Cleveland loses, LeBron still might have a chance at MVP. And I'm saying no way. But Vegas seems to be on the side of those people that say that it could happen. Because having him at 1-1 odds to win the MVP, but yet having Cleveland at 7-1 odds to win the title just doesn't add up. That means that the Vegas thinks that there's a good chance that even if and when the Warriors win the championship, they think LeBron has a pretty decent chance of winning MVP. And they basically think LeBron has a better chance than Iguodala, which I don't think so. And I also think if the series ended right now, if the series ended today, Andre Iguodala is the MVP. I know Steph Curry put together a great offensive Game 5. And offensively speaking in the series, I think Curry's been better overall, as you'd expect the MVP to be. But the more impactful player, the more important player throughout the series, the X factor, and also, in my opinion, the MVP has been Andre Iguodala. Only slightly. I still think Steph Curry's got a good chance at it, but I think Iguodala deserves it right now, and if he puts together a good Game 6, would deserve it a little bit more than Steph Curry. Now, if Steph Curry comes out and then throws up 35 or more, even 30 or more maybe, in Game 6, then I'll probably change my tune. But as of now, I think Iguodala deserves it, and I think if he puts together a good Game 6, he will deserve it more than Curry. And I think at 9-1, or sorry, not at 9-1, at 5-1, I would jump on Andre Iguodala as my MVP. I really like those odds because he, to me, is the MVP right now. I don't think there's much. I mean, I think there's a little bit of debate between him and Curry, but I don't think it's much debate right now. It all depends on if Curry puts together a great Game 6 or not, which he is very capable of doing, of course. But as I mentioned, the thing that surprises me is LeBron James being 1-1 and being favored over Andre Iguodala, because of course the last guy to win MVP and his team not to win the title is Jerry West, and it's basically an unwritten rule that just doesn't happen. It doesn't matter how good you are on the losing team, your team still lost. You weren't the most valuable player. But for some reason, a lot of the media loves, and LeBron James has been great in this series. He's done a great job carrying a team without two of their best players. I give him full credit for that. He should not be the MVP. The MVP, let's look at the regular season. Why did Steph Curry win the MVP? Because Steph Curry, actually, he wasn't the highest scorer. He wasn't the highest assist man. He's not a great defender. He's a decent defender. Why did he win the MVP over, say, let's not even go James Harden. Why did he win the MVP instead of Russell Westbrook, who in my opinion is actually maybe a little bit better than Steph Curry overall in terms of basketball talent? Because Russell Westbrook, basically he was carrying a bad team. Once Kevin Durant goes down, that team's not that good. He was carrying them for most of the season. He was a triple-double machine, scoring 30-plus in every game. Just this, aside from LeBron, he's the most athletic player on the planet. So why did Russell Westbrook not win MVP? Well, it's obvious. Why did he not even get that many votes? It's obvious, because his team didn't even make the playoffs. They weren't winning. They weren't winning basketball games. So, of course, Steph Curry, who's the best player on the most winning team, won the MVP award. It's not because he was actually the best player in the world. We could have given it to James Harden, who was a higher scorer, who you could even argue might have been more important for his team. You could have given it to LeBron James, who's still the best player in the world. Could have given it, as I mentioned, to Russell Westbrook. You could have given it to Anthony Davis, who's just emerged as, one of the best players and just an absolute beast both on the offensive and defensive end. But no, we gave it to Steph Curry because he led the best team in basketball, the most winning team in basketball. And so why would the rules change once the NBA Finals come around, we still should win it to the most winning team, to the best player on the most winning team, which is either right now Steph Curry or Iguodala, depending on who you talk to. But giving it to LeBron James would kind of be an insult, honestly, to the entire Warriors team, to the organization, who worked their butt off for a championship, and you're saying, well, the MVP, the most valuable player, the best player, not the best player, because MVP doesn't mean best player. It means who was most valuable. And you're telling me the guy who was most valuable is the guy who lost the series? Assuming that this happens, of course. Assuming that they lose the series, the Cavaliers. You're telling me that that's the best player, or that's the most valuable player? I would have to disagree. I don't think it should happen. I don't think it will happen. I've just heard a few different pundits, a few different people say that they think it should happen, and maybe they don't even believe it. Maybe it's just something they're saying, but I think it's an absurd take. But apparently even Vegas is buying into the idea because they do have LeBron James at pretty solid odds to win MVP. Only Steph Curry is slightly ahead of him. And that surprises me. I'm surprised. But I understand LeBron James, of course. If the Cavaliers win it, there's no question on who the MVP is. But right now, like I said, it's a 3-horse race. Depending on who you think is going to win. And depending on, if I were to bet going forward, I think Steph Curry right now would win the MVP, will win the MVP at the end of the day. But if I were to bet right now, I think it should be Iguodala. And if I were putting money down, I like the 5-1 odds on Iguodala, so I'd probably put money on him, even though I think there's a good chance Steph Curry will end up with the MVP at the end of the day. But that's just my take for that. We'll see what happens. It should be great. It should be a great last game, maybe last 2 games, hopefully. I'm rooting for the Cavs in Game 6 just so we can see a Game 7. But I do think the Warriors wrap it up on Tuesday night. And so let's move to the MLB, where I'll go over my picks from last week. There was only 8 games last week. I think I went 4-4. So just, 2 weeks in a row of basically, kind of mediocrity. That shows how baseball is. I basically went with the better pitcher in almost every matchup, and I went 4-4. I lost the Pittsburgh-Milwaukee. I picked Pittsburgh. Milwaukee won. Miami-Toronto. I picked Toronto, and they won. San Diego-Atlanta. I picked San Diego. They won. Philadelphia-Cincinnati. I picked Philadelphia. Cincinnati won. Houston and Chicago. I picked Chicago. Chicago won. Kansas City-Minnesota. I picked Kansas City. Kansas City won. St. Louis at Colorado. I picked St. Louis, and Colorado won. And Arizona at Los Angeles. I picked Arizona, and Los Angeles won. So I went 4-4, as I mentioned. And that's how baseball goes generally, but I'm going to give my takes again on this week's matchups. Hopefully I can do better with this week's games than I did with last week's. But we'll see what happens. Baseball, I'm in a little bit of a slump recently, but generally my rule is often go with the better pitcher when all else fails. That's kind of the rule I tend to live by. Whether or not it works for me is a different issue. But another interesting thing to look at from last Monday is every single team that won by more than a run. Won by more than that, because the run line is 1.5 runs. Every single team won by 2 runs or more, meaning every team that won covered that 1.5 run line. Whether it be the favorite or the underdog, of course. So that's something to look for. I usually do like to go with the -1.5 if I pick the favorites. And I rarely go with the +1.5 if I pick the underdogs, because I just don't think... I think it's tough to predict a 1-run baseball game, no matter who's playing, no matter who's pitching. So I don't like to predict that. But let's go through the games today. There's a good amount of them. It looks like there's more than last week. So let's look at it. Starting with the Chicago White Sox and Rodon pitching for them versus Pittsburgh and Francisco Liriano pitching for the Pirates. And Liriano's favored for good reason. I do think that he should be favored. He's pitched well this year. Similar to A.J. Burnett also on the Pirates. They seem to have a thing for getting the best out of those pitchers who have struggled in the AL. I think that Liriano and the Pirates win that game, and I'm going to say they do win it by the 1.5, by more than 1.5. So let's go to Cincinnati and Moscot versus Detroit and Anibal Sanchez. Anibal Sanchez favored, and favored by more than 1.5, or yeah, I should say favored and favored heavily. Even the minus 1.5 is almost even. I'd pick Detroit, and I'd probably pick them minus 1.5. I do like that. I do like them in that matchup. Then you get to Philadelphia and Aaron Harang versus Baltimore and Yi Chen. And Baltimore is favored and favored pretty heavily in that matchup. Mainly not necessarily because of the pitchers, but just because Philadelphia has been pretty bad all year long. And Baltimore's playing relatively well lately. I like Baltimore. I'm not sure if I like them minus 1.5 or not. I don't like picking all the favorites, but I am going to say that Baltimore wins that one minus the 1.5. Next we get to Washington and Gio Gonzalez versus Tampa Bay and Esmil Ramirez. And Tampa Bay is slightly favored in this one. It's pretty even, relatively speaking. But Tampa Bay is slightly favored because, just because. And I actually do like Washington in this matchup. I've always liked Gio Gonzalez, the lefty, and I do like Washington just the way they've played lately. So we'll see what happens. We've got Atlanta and Perez pitching versus Boston and Rick Porcello, and Boston favored pretty heavily over Atlanta. And I do think that, actually, I'm going to go with Atlanta in that one. In the upset, I'm going to say Atlanta wins that one. So the next matchup is Toronto with Mark Buehrle on the mound, maybe the most underrated pitcher of the last 10 years, versus the Mets and Syndergaard. And Syndergaard's pitched very well lately, and the Mets are favored. And I just showed my bias for Mark Buehrle, and Toronto's played very well lately as well. So I think that I'm going to go with Mark Buehrle and the Blue Jays in that one. So another underdog. Next, it's the Yankees and Tanaka versus Miami and Kohler. And Tanaka, for good reason, is favored in that matchup. I'm going to say that the Yankees and Tanaka continues rolling. He's pitched very well lately since coming off the DL. And the Yankees have been relatively hot lately, even though they did lose a couple of games in a row. They won yesterday. And I'm going to say the Yankees win by more than 1.5 in that one. Then you get Cleveland and Trevor Bauer versus the Chicago Cubs and Arrieta. And the Cubs are favored, pretty middling. They're favored in that one. I don't think there's much of an advantage for either of these pitchers. They're both decent pitchers, not great. Chicago, the fact that they're favored as much as they are kind of surprises me. I think I'm going to go with Cleveland to beat Chicago in that matchup. Then you go with the Los Angeles Dodgers and Frias versus Texas and Giovanni Gallardo. The Dodgers, in my opinion, a better team, but Texas they've come on really strong since their struggles early in the year. So credit to them. And Giovanni Gallardo, I think, is the better pitcher in this matchup. So I'm going to say that Texas wins this one. Technically speaking, actually, the Dodgers are favored, even though it's completely even. The odds makers say that the Dodgers are favored, so you can't pick Texas minus 1.5. So I'm just picking Texas to win this one. So then you get to the Colorado Rockies versus the Houston Astros. You get Bettis for the Rockies and Keuchel for the Astros. Keuchel's pitched very well lately, and Houston's played well. They're heavily favored. and I think I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to say Houston wins that one, and they will win by the one. I'll say they win by the 1.5. Then you get Kansas City and Volquez versus the Milwaukee Brewers and Kyle Lohse. And I think I like Volquez a little bit more in that matchup. And also Milwaukee's just not that good of a team. So I think the Royals win. I'm not sure they win by 1.5, but I'll for the sake of the picks, I'm going to say that everybody wins by the 1.5. I'll say that Kansas City wins by 1.5 in that matchup. Then you get Minnesota and May versus St. Louis and John Lackey again. Lackey didn't do much for me in that last matchup when I picked him, but I think I'm going to pick him again. I like St. Louis. Maybe they'll do me in again, but I'll say that Lackey wins by more than 1.5. Then you get Arizona and Robbie Ray versus the Angels and Jared Weaver. And Weaver, for good reason, is the favorite in this matchup, relatively heavily favored in that matchup. I think that I'll say that the Angels win that matchup, and I think that I'll say they win by more than 1.5. And then we get to the Oakland Athletics and the San Diego Padres. It's the Athletics have Hahn on the mound, and the Padres have Tyson Ross on the mound. Padres are slightly favored in that one. I do like the Padres this year. I liked them going into the season. And I'm going to say that they win this game. They are favored, so I'll say that they win by the 1.5. Of course, I'm picking everybody with the spreads. Then the final game of the night is the late night game, Seattle with Taijuan Walker versus San Fran and Tim Hudson. Both pretty good pitchers on the mound. San Fran's slightly favored in this one, and Hudson slightly favored in this one. I'm actually going to go with the underdog. I'm going to say Seattle wins that one in a tough pitcher's duel. So we'll see how I do next week. But those are my picks for this week. Of course, went 4-4 this week, and maybe I'll keep adding up my picks, and we'll see how I do week in and week out. I think I'm going to start calling the segment. Maybe I'll call it Extra Innings. I need a name for it, so I'll try to think that up within the next week. Maybe I'll call it the Extra Innings segment. But for now, those are my picks. And that's pretty much, it's kind of a not a slow week, of course, with the NBA Finals going on. But there's not too much else. Of course, there's always hockey. I haven't really talked much about the Stanley Cup, the playoffs, or the finals going on with the Blackhawks and the Lightning, mainly because I don't know. I'm not a big hockey guy, and I don't want to make picks on a sport that I don't know as well as I do any of the others. If going into the series, I thought that the Blackhawks would win, but there wasn't much rhyme or reason to why. Now they're up 3-2, and they're heavily favored. They're also favored in Game 6. I actually like the Lightning in Game 6, even though the game is in Chicago. I just have a weird feeling that one's going 7. The way that these playoffs have gone, I think a close game where the Tampa Bay Lightning win. So if you're looking for an underdog, pick them. And then I like Chicago in Game 7, which is also probably not the favorite pick. But if that happens, I like Chicago in Game 7, and I like Chicago to win the Stanley Cup. But that's not the safest pick in the world, not hockey, of course, not my sport. So that's why I haven't focused too much on hockey. And once that's done, then we kind of get into the summer rut. Mostly baseball is mostly what's going on. So we'll talk about that, maybe baseball more in depth next week, and then we'll finish off with the basketball talk, and we'll also talk probably a little bit more football as the football season gets a little bit closer. We're all begging for a little bit of football. I'll see what I can find, what I can scrounge up, so that we can talk a little bit of football. Just find an excuse to talk a little bit of football next week on Gamblers Anonymous. But that's all I've got for you on this week's edition, so I hope you enjoyed.